Welcome back, Cat 5 class. We're starting chapter 10. So using Autocad, we're going to create section views. So starting with chapter 10, you're going to have to create your own drawings from scratch. I'm not providing you any Autocad files anymore, other than test number 3, which will be in about a month. All right, so I will provide you with the 3D model. Okay, so let's take a look at the 3D model. Okay, so we'll provide you with a 3D model that you can open up any drawings or any 3D software. We'll come back to this. Okay, so let's go back to the assignment, problem 10-1. Okay, so we're going to take the top view and we're going to cut through and expose the features. So we're going to expose this first feature, second feature, and the third feature. So we're using our cutting plane, and this is an offset section view that we're going to create. Okay, so we're going to cut through the top view, and our front view will be our section view. So let's go ahead and cheat and take a look at the answer key. So this is what we're going to draw using AutoCAD. We're going to draw our top view, and we're going to use a section cutting plane to cut through the first feature, which is a plain simple hole. Then we're going to offset, cut through this counterbore hole, but instead of being circular, it's rectangular. Okay, so this is a rectangular counterbore hole, and it's not circular. And then we'll continue cutting through, offset again, and cut through this third feature to expose that it's a simple cylindrical hole. Notice how the circular hole, there's a center line. Same thing for the one on the left. We have a center line. Notice there's no center line for this counterbore hole, and it's because it's rectangular. It's not circular. But you can make the argument, hey, this is symmetrical. Left and right side are symmetrical. So you can throw in a center line if you like. Okay, one thing to note, okay, so it was mentioned in chapter 9 and in chapter 10 lecture, in a section view, there are no hidden lines. What did he say? I said no hidden lines, right? And just a warning, in our next test, test number 3, if you show red hidden lines in the section view, I will take points off. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to take a look at this top view, and we're going to use our cutting plane to go through these 3 features and create our section view. So our front view will be turned into a section view. Dimensions are optional. Okay, some of you may want to throw in dimensions for practice. You're more than welcome to use dimensions. If you want to use a title block and border, okay, go for it. All I need is a front view, a top view, our cutting plane, and our section view. Okay, that's all you need to get the full credit, but you're welcome to use a title block and border and dimensions if you like. All right, so let's take a look at the 3D model. So I will email you the 3D models. Okay, don't forget to right-click Extract All from the zipped folder, right? So you can have access to these files. Okay, so here is the top view. Let's go ahead and take a look at the top view. Okay, so there's the top view. Okay, and we have our front view, except our front view will be turned into a section view. Let me go ISO view, isometric view. Okay, and I'm going to use the section command. If you don't see it down here, go to the top and go through the drop downs and look for section. So I'm going to click on section. Okay, I got lucky. It gave me the YX plane as my cutting plane. You can always click through to pick a different plane to cut with. Let's go to the first one. Okay, so there's our cutting plane. And actually, I just realized that here's our top view. It looks like I have my top view rotated 180 degrees by mistake. Let's take a look at the answer key or at the handout. Yep, so the holes are towards the bottom and the counterbore rectangular hole is on top. So I have this backwards, that's okay. All right, so we need to flip it. Here's the flip option. I can flip this. Okay, there it is. All right, so if you want to translate the cutting plane, just left mouse click inside the cutting plane and you can slide it along so you can see. So we're going to cut through the first feature. So if you cut through the material, you're going to hatch, right? When you cut through the solid, just imagine the teeth of the saw cutting through and leaving teeth marks, right? And in the areas where there's an opening like this simple hole, same thing with this one, you do not hatch this area. This is an open area. And we're going to offset and also expose the second feature, okay, to show that it's a counterbore rectangular hole. Again, you can slide by left mouse clicking inside the cutting plane to translate it so you can see. Okay, so let's first go through the first hole, then we'll go through the second feature and finally the third feature. All right, so let's go to AutoCAD. All right, so you're starting from scratch. Using AutoCAD, you're going to create your own views from scratch, and you also have to set up your layers. But if you want to cheat and use an old drawing from one of the previous chapters in AutoCAD, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to open up one of my old files. All right, so I'm opening up one of my old files from a previous chapter. It already has a layer set up, most of them. I don't have a hatching or a cutting plane layer, which I'll add. Okay, so I'm going to save this as problem 10-1. Okay, so I can either click here, save as, or I can click on the AutoCAD icon and go to save as. All right, so I'm going to go over to chapter 10. Okay, so I'm going to save it in my chapter 10 folder. I'm going to call this problem 10-1. Okay, so problem 10-1. So I'm saving this old file with the new name. Okay, so problem 10-1, I'm going to save it. By the way, if you want to save it as an old version of AutoCAD, maybe at work, you probably use an old version of AutoCAD. You can always downgrade. You can always go to the pull down here. So if you're using let's say you're using 2012 AutoCAD at work, in order to open that file at work, you have to use an older version, 2010, 2007, 2004, and so on. So you can just click on it and it'll save it as an older version of AutoCAD so you can open it at work. All right, so I'll just leave it at 2018, even though I'm using 2021. I'm using 2021 AutoCAD. Anything 2018 or newer will be able to open up my file. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save it. All right, so if I look on top now, instead of problem 18-1, now it's problem 10-1, right? So this is a new file, problem 10-1 in chapter 10. All right, so I'm going to just window capture everything. I'm going to delete everything. So I left mouse click and hold and rope around and delete. Okay, now I'm going to start from scratch. Okay, so let's take a look at the handout. All right, so we're going to start by drawing a rectangle. Okay, so, and later on we'll create our layers for the cutting plane and the section lines. Okay, so this is 3. So 3 by 6. So I'm going to start by creating a rectangle, 3 by 6 rectangle. Okay, so let's go over to the visible layer. I'm going to make my lines a little thicker just for this video. You want to keep them at around 0.60 for the line weight of the object line. So I'm just going to increase it for the video so it's easier to see. Do the same thing with the green center lines. All right, so let's go ahead and close this. All right, so I'm going to go to the white visible object layer and I'm going to create my 3x6 rectangle. Okay, so first I'm going to make sure I have ortho on, right? Ortho, and I want to have object snap turned on. All right, so using the line command, so I'm going to start anywhere. So I can roll the wheel if I want to zoom in and out. I'm going to just randomly pick a point in space and start my top view. I can always move it later. Okay, so using line command, I'm just going to pick anywhere in space, click. Notice I have ortho on. So now I'm going to show you the point and shoot method or point and go method. Okay, so I click my first point. Now I'm aiming to the right and I'm just going to type in 6. That's the length, 6. Enter. Then I'm going to aim upward. Type in 3. Enter. Oh, forgot to type it in. Actually, I did type in 3. I just forgot to type in enter in 3, 2, 1. Enter. There it is. And I'm going to point to the left. Type in 6. Okay, so as you can see in the command line, I'm typing in 6, enter, and close it off. All right, so I can right click enter or hit escape to exit. Now, some of you probably are using dynamic input. If you don't see the dynamic input icon, go to the very last icon on the status bar, and you can turn on your dynamic input. Some of you will prefer to use dynamic input. Okay, so let me, I'm going to redo this rectangle again using dynamic input, and you'll see the difference. So I'm going to use line command again, and I'll just pick somewhere in space, anywhere in space, click anywhere, click. So this is dynamic input. You can type things in on the fly. So I can type in 6 for my length, enter. Point upward, type in 3, enter. Aim to the left. Now I don't have to put the minus since I'm already aiming left, so I don't have to put -6. I can just type in 6, enter, and close it off. And right click enter or hit escape on the keyboard or enter on the keyboard to exit the line command. Okay, so that was another option. If you want to use, once again, dynamic input, I know some of you probably prefer it, so there it is. So let me go ahead and delete this extra rectangle. I'll delete it. All right, I'm going to roll the wheel to zoom in. Okay, so that was one option. We can also use the rectangle command. I'll show that in one of the other problems in this chapter for your assignment. So instead of line command, we could have also used the rectangle command. All right, so let's go back. All right, so we have a second rectangle on the inside, and the reason for it is because we have a chamfer going along the edges. Okay, so a chamfer is a straight cut at an angle. It's not round, it's flat, but it's at an angle, typically 45 degrees or 30 or 60 degrees, but 45 degrees is the most common angle when we do a chamfer. Okay, as you can see, the call out for the chamfer is 0.25 by 0.25 inches, and the circle on the leader indicates that it goes all the way around. Okay, so we have a chamfer going all the way around. That's what the circle indicates. If it's a circle inside of another circle, if it's two circles, a little one and a large one, that means chamfer all over. That means all the edges, even the bottom ones and the side ones, will be chamfered. Okay, but in this case, we only have one circle indicating that we're just going around, in this case, around the top. Okay, and chamfers are to avoid having sharp corners. Okay, so you don't want somebody cutting themselves on a sharp edge, or you don't want to damage other parts as you're assembling or installing parts. Okay, so to avoid damaging other parts or the installer cutting themselves on the hand, we create chamfers and also fillets, right? The fillets are the round ones. All right, so we're going to do an offset of 0.25 inches. So 0.25 is from an imaginary intersection point. Let me go to this side, the opposite side. So if we were to extend this line and extend the vertical line, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So if we were to extend this line and extend this line at the intersection point, you go 0.25 to the left and 0.25 down. Okay, so that's what the 0.25 space by space 0.25 tells us. Okay, so from an imaginary intersection point, 0.25 to the right in this case, and 0.25 down. That defines the size of our chamfer. Pretty much you're defining the leg size on a triangle, right? You're not calling out the length of the hypotenuse. All right, so let's go ahead and draw our rectangle. We're going to offset by 1/4 of an inch all the way around. 0.25. Okay, so let's go ahead and use the offset. Okay, so here's offset. Click on offset. And we're going to type in a distance. So it's waiting for us to specify a distance. So I'm going to click inside the command line and type in 0.25. So 0.25 inches or 0.25 units. And enter. And now we can click on any line. Let's start with the bottom. Click. We can offset inward or outward. We're going inward. Click. Now let's click on the one on the right. Click. We can go outward or inward. We're going inward. Go to the top line. Click. And again, we're offsetting by 0.25 inches and we're going inward with all 4 sides. Inward. Okay, we're done. So we can go ahead and right click enter to exit. Okay, so obviously these lines are overextended. We can either use the trim command or we can just use the grips to shorten it. Okay, this is the fast way of doing it. There's other ways of doing this and I'll leave it up to you which way you want to go with. It pretty much comes down to a matter of preference. Do you want to use trim command? Do you want to use grips? All right, hit escape to deselect. There it is. Okay, so there's our top view. Now we need to include our features, but before we do, let's go ahead and do the corners. Let's go back. Okay, so we do have these lines, right, where the chamfer ends for one and starts on the other side. Okay, so we need to draw these lines, and we simply can go corner to corner. And then we'll come back and do the circles. All right, so using the line command, and I'm going to turn off ortho. Okay, so now we can just simply connect the corners. I'm going to hit enter and then hit space bar on the keyboard to repeat the same command, which is line command. Right click enter, hit space bar again on the keyboard. Right click enter to exit, hit space bar again. And right click enter to exit. Okay, so there it is. There's our top view. Now let's throw in some of the features. Other features like the circle, the circular hole. All right, so we need to locate this hole. We need to know where the center is at. So notice it's telling us it's 1 inch from this corner. You go 1 inch to the right. And then we're going to go 1 inch upward. Okay, so we're going to go 1 inch across to the right and 1 inch upward to define our center point. And the hole diameter, let's take a look at the diameter. So 2x tells us that we have 2 holes with the same diameter of 1/2 inch. All right, so let's go ahead and locate the center. All right, so from this corner, I'm going to go 1 inch to the right and then 1 inch up. Okay, so I'm going to use construction lines. You don't have to use construction lines. You can stay on the visible layer if you like. and then come back and delete the evidence that you cheated with construction lines. Okay, so let me change the color on my construction lines so we can see them. Instead of magenta for construction lines, I'm going to use, I'll use yellow. Stands out, so. All right, so using line command, I'm going to start at the bottom left corner. I'm going to click. Oh, I'm in the wrong layer. Oh, hit escape, I'm in the wrong layer. Forgot to switch over to construction layer. Yep, even your instructor makes mistakes, believe it or not. Here we go. Okay, so line command, once again. Click on the bottom left corner, click. And we're gonna go to the right 1 inch. Let me turn on ortho. Okay, so turn on ortho to create vertical and horizontal lines, as you can see. So I'm gonna go to the right, type in 1, enter. Then I'm gonna aim upward and type in 1 again and enter. And I can right click enter to exit. And there's our center point. Okay, so our center for the hole is right there. So now let's move back to the visible object layer. And we're going to use the circle command. Circle. Okay, so we're going to pick our center point. I think I misclicked. Let me escape. Let me zoom in a little bit. Try it again. Circle command. Okay, I got the endpoint. Click. All right, and now I'm going to type in a diameter, not a radius. Notice that it's asking me for a radius. So we're going to type in a diameter. Diameter is 0.50. Radius is 0.25, half of the diameter. So I don't have to do any math in my head. I'll just click, hey, I want to type in diameter. So now it's asking me for the diameter. I can type in 0.50 for diameter and enter. And there it is. Okay, so now we can draw the other circle by simply using mirror. So I need a line in the middle to help me use symmetry, right? Or I should say the mirror command. Okay, so I'm going to use my construction layer. I'm going to draw a line, a vertical line going midpoint to midpoint. Notice the green triangle. If you don't see the green triangle for the midpoint, you can always right click on Object Snap. Right click on Object Snap icon and turn on the midpoint option. Okay, mine is on. You can see the check mark. Okay, so now let's go ahead and click on that green triangle. That's the midpoint. Click. And click on the opposite midpoint and click. Now I can right click enter to exit. So that's my line of symmetry. And I'm going to use the endpoints of this line of symmetry to draw the circle on the right. Okay, so I'm going to use mirror, right? Okay, so mirror. I'm going to mirror. What am I going to mirror? So it's asking me, so select the objects to mirror. I'm only going to select the circle. Click. Hit enter. And now I need to define my line of symmetry to mirror. So I'm going to pick the endpoint at the top and then endpoint at the bottom, right? Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see that it's waiting for me to select the second endpoint to define my line of symmetry and click. Okay, so do you want to erase the original objects? No, I don't. So the default is no. So I can just hit enter and it'll keep the original circle in this case. All right, so let's move on to the rectangular counterbore hole. Okay, so let's take a look at the answer key. We're going to cheat. Okay, so far so good. We need the rectangular counterbore hole, and then we'll come in and draw our cutting plane. All right, so let's take a look at the measurements. Okay, so They're giving us dimensions to this corner and to this corner. Okay, so we're going to go 225 to the right, 225. Then we're going to go up 150. Okay, so 150. So 225 to the right and 150 up. And that'll be our starting point. And now we can see that this rectangular hole has a length of 1.50. And this is not dimensioned correctly. You don't want to dimension hidden lines. Okay, so this is not correct. Most checkers or supervisors, when they're checking somebody else's drawing, they tend to forget that you're not supposed to dimension hidden features, hidden lines, right? So these are supposed to go up here in the top view. But let's go ahead and ignore that. All right, so let's move on. So we're going to go 225 to the right, and then we're going to go up 150. That's our starting point. And we'll go 150 across, and then 0.75 up, and then 150 back, and 0.75 down. All right, so let's go back to AutoCAD. Okay, so we are in the construction layer. Okay, so I'm going to use the line command. So I'm going to go 225 across from this bottom left corner, click. I have ortho on, as you can see, so I'm going to aim to the right, type in 2.25, enter. And then we're going to go upward 1.50 and enter. Okay, and right click enter to exit. Okay, so there's our starting point for the rectangle. Okay, so the rectangle is 150 by 0.75. So let's go to the visible object layer. Okay, and click. Okay, so using line command. Here's our starting point. Click. We're going to go 150 to the right, 1.50. Enter. Then go up 0.75. Enter. And back 1.50. Again, you don't put the minus because we're aiming left. Okay, so 1.50, going leftward. Enter. And then finally we close it. Click and right click enter. And once again, we can use the offset command to create the smaller rectangle. Let's go take a look at the handout. So by doing a little bit of math, we know it's 0.25, right? So the distance from the larger rectangular counterbore hole, right, to the little one is 175 minus 150, which is 0.25. Okay, so we can also do the math here. It's 0.25 plus 0.25 plus 0.25 is 0.75. All right, so let's do an offset of 0.25, just like we did with the chamfer. All right, so let's go ahead and do offset. When we go to offset, it remembers our last input of 0.25, so we don't have to type in 0.25, it's already there. So let's just hit enter and accept the 0.25 for our distance, enter. Okay, so let's go around the rectangle, click, and then go inward. Click on the next one, click, and point inward. Next one, click, point inward, and the last side of this large rectangle, or larger of the two rectangles, click, and point inward, click, and there's our offset. Right click enter to exit, and now we can use the grips to shorten it to the correct length. Okay, and there it is. Hit escape on the keyboard to deselect. There's our top view. Okay, so we do need green center lines, but our cutting plane is going to overlap the green center lines, which is actually normal. It happens quite often where our cutting plane will overlap a center line. So we tend to allow the cutting plane line to override the center line. and leave out that center line in that portion, in that area where it's being overridden by the cutting plane line. All right, so let's go to the answer key. So notice we do have center lines at the holes, right, our center mark, but the horizontal ones are being overridden by the cutting plane line. Okay, so we can just leave out the horizontal center line, but don't forget to include the vertical green center lines. All right, so let's do our cutting plane. And we need to draw arrows. Okay, so we need to create a layer first for our cutting plane. Okay, so let's start a new layer. So let's go to layer properties. And we're going to create a new layer. Okay, so we're going to go here to the plus, the little icon with the little plus, to create a new layer. Click. All right, and it defaulted to the active layer, which is the visible layer. See how it took on the properties of the visible object layer? Okay, so we're going to change those. I'm going to go with the blue. Pick whatever color you like for your layers. So from here on, you can use whatever colors you like for your layers. You don't have to follow the colors I've chosen. All right, so I'm going to hit OK. And once again, for object lines, we tend to go with around 0.60 millimeters in thickness. And with our cutting plane line, we go with around 0.30, same thickness as a red hidden line or green center line. Or we go with something thicker than an object line. Object line is 0.60, so we tend to go a little bit thicker. Okay, so obviously my object line is at 1 millimeter, just so it looks cleaner on this video. Okay, so I'm just going to make my cutting plane line, instead of 0.80, let's say, I'm going to go with 120, just so we can see it in this video. Okay, and hit OK. And for the line type, we can go with phantom lines. So instead of a continuous line with no breaks, let's change it to a phantom line. So I'm going to click on the continuous line type, click on it, and I'm going to look for phantom. Notice that phantom is the one with the two little dashes. Center lines have one little dash. Okay, so I don't see phantom, so we need to load it from the library. Okay, so we're going to go to load. And I'm just going to go down the list and look for phantom. There it is. There's a few options. I'll just pick the first one. Phantom, notice that there are two little dashes. I'm going to select it to load it onto my list, onto my favorites, right? So we're going to select phantom, hit OK. And it loads it into my list. There it is, phantom. Now it's loaded into my favorites. So I need to now select it again to make it part of this new layer. And OK. Okay, so there it is, phantom. And I actually forgot to give it a name. So it just defaulted to layer 1. Let me click on it. Left mouse click once and just be patient. Okay, there it is. And avoid using symbols or spaces or slashes or pound sign. So I'll keep it simple. So this is going to be my cutting plane line. So I'll just call it cutting. Oh, let's see, click on it again. Okay, so I left mouse clicked again. And let's call it cutting. And I'll click away. And there it is. Again, when you're naming a layer, avoid using spaces or symbols, because AutoCAD may reject it. All right, so there it is. I'm going to go ahead and close it. And I'm going to go over to my cutting layer. Or if you want to call it sectioning, go for it. All right, so let me zoom out a little bit. So I'm going to draw a line going through the hole, then offset, cut through the counterboard, offset, and cut through the second circular hole. All right, so let's use the line command. So I'm going to hover over the center point. I'm going to track it. I click, go across. And I'm just going to guesstimate the location. Click. I'm going to try and make sure it goes through the midpoint. Click. There it is. I'm just guesstimating the location of the offset. Just make it look presentable, right? Click and click. And right click enter. Okay, so there's my cutting line. Okay, now we need to draw our arrowheads. Let's go back to the answer key. Okay, now AutoCAD doesn't have a command for arrowheads. So we're gonna have to draw our own arrowheads. You can use the triangle command, or we can use polyline. Okay, but first we need an extension line. Okay, so we need an extension line. Okay, so let's go ahead and draw another line. This would be my extension line. I'm going to right click enter to exit. There it is. Okay, actually let me make this a little bit longer. There it is. Okay, hit escape to deselect. Okay, so we can simply draw a triangle and just eyeball it. So let me show you the cheap and quick way of doing a arrowhead, which I'll accept. Okay, so line command, start at the endpoint, and here I need to turn off ortho. Let me turn off ortho so I can go at different angles other than vertical or horizontal. Okay, so if you just want to draw a rectangle and just eyeball it, I'm okay with it. Ta-da! So that's one option. Let me undo and show you another way. Okay, so I hit undo. There it is. Okay, another way is to use polyline. Okay, so we're going to use polyline. Okay, so polyline. So it's asking us for a starting point. So I'll pick the endpoint for my starting point. Click. Okay, so it's for now it's creating a line, but we're going to make some changes to this line. We're going to change the width. So we're basically changing the line weight or the line thickness. So we're going to go to width, click. And for my starting width, I'm going to go with 0. So because we're drawing an arrowhead, it's pointing on one end, right? So I'm going to type in 0 for my line weight or thickness. Type in 0 for the starting, enter. Now it's asking us for the ending width. So I actually don't know what ending width to use. Do I use 0.1, 0.2, 0.5, 1? I have no clue. So I'm going to try 1 and see what I get. 1, enter. And it's a little too wide, but maybe I should have gone with 0.5. I'll accept it either way. Let me hit undo. Let me go to undo. Okay, and I'm going to start over again. Instead of 1, I'm going to use 0.5. Okay, so let's use polyline again. Polyline. Polyline. It's asking me for the starting point. There it is, starting point. I'm going to click on width. I'll pick 0 as my starting point. Arrowheads are sharp, right? So we're going to start with 0. Enter. And for my second or ending width, I'm going to go with 0.5. 0.5. Enter. And that's a little better. And I'll just guesstimate the size and click. Notice you can keep on going if you like with polyline. I'm done, so I'm just going to right click enter to exit. And there's our arrowhead. And just like a regular line, you can click on it and use the grips to extend it, to move it, etc. Okay, hit escape. Obviously this arrowhead is a lot bigger than what we need. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy it over to the right. Okay, so I'm going to left mouse click, select it, arrowhead and its leader, and I'm going to make a copy. Copy. I'll copy it over from this lower endpoint, and I'll copy it over to the other side. There it is. And you can keep on clicking to create more. I'm done, so I'm going to right click enter to exit. And there's our top view. All we need now is our green center lines. Okay, so let's go to the green center layer and draw some vertical lines. Right click enter and do it again on the right side. And right click enter. Okay, now some of you may be, hey teacher, I don't see my line weights, right? In case you forgot, line weights, if you don't see the line weights, maybe you see something like this, right? and you want to see line weights. Okay, so you got to turn on the line weight. So it looks like almost like a radio equalizer or music equalizer. I'm going to click on it and it turns them on. If you don't see the icon for line weight, you need to go to the last icon on the status bar, click on it, and you need to turn on your line weight. Okay, so make sure there's a check mark. Once you click on it, it'll add a check mark and load it to the status bar. All right, so let's go ahead and finish off our front view, which is now going to be a section view. Okay, so we're going to cheat. I'm going to use construction lines. I'm going to draw lines going vertically down from every feature. There it is. Okay, I'm going to right click enter, and then watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this construction line. I'm going to make copies of it. I'm just going to make a bunch of copies. Copy. And I'm going to copy this construction line. Right. Let me hit escape. I forgot to pre-select it, or maybe I did. Let me hit escape, start over again. I'm going to pre-select this construction line, make a copy of it, select my reference point. There it is. And then I'm just gonna, let me turn off ortho so I have freedom to move it. Ortho, there it is. Now I'm gonna go to every feature, every quadrant, every center point, every corner. That way I know where I'm going to have to draw something, right? In our projection view. In this case, it's our front view converted into a section view. Okay, so I think I got them all. Right click enter. Should have probably made them a little bit longer. Okay, but now we can use this to help us create our front view, which is going to be turned into a section view. All right, so let's take a look at the handout. So here's our front view, but we're going to turn it into a section view. And again, the section view is meant to expose features that are inside the part. So if we go back to the 3D model, we're exposing the two holes, right? And we're also going to expose the counterbore rectangular hole. All right, so let's go back. Let's take a look at the answer key. Okay, so this is what our section view is going to look like. So again, we're replacing the front view with a section view. Okay, so let's take a look at some dimensions here. Okay, so the height is 150. So it's 6 across, right? 6 across and 150 up. So let's start with the rectangle and then we'll add the chamfers. All right, so let me first go to the visible object layer. I'm going to use the line command. And I can start anywhere in this area. Okay, so I'll just start down here. I can always move my views closer or further apart if need to. All right, so once we're done. Okay, so I'll start at this endpoint, click, and I'll just go all the way across, right? We want to line up with this corner. Click, and I'm going to go up 1.50, enter, and go across. Oh, I should have turned on ortho. My lines look horizontal and vertical, so it looks good. Okay, type in 6, enter, and close it off. And right click enter to exit. Okay, so there's our section view. We're going to chamfer the corners. I'm going to roll the wheel and zoom in a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and chamfer the corners at the top. Okay, so let's go to chamfer. And don't forget the chamfers are 0.25 by 0.25. Okay, so we're not using fillet, we're using chamfer. Fillets are for rounds, fillets are for straight cuts, and they're typically at 45 degrees like the ones we're going to create. Okay, so chamfer. Okay, so we're going to click on the word distance in the command line, distance. Our first one is 0.25, so I'm going to type in 0.25, enter. Now it's asking for the second distance. It's 0.25 again. Enter. Okay, so now don't click on the actual corner, but on the actual line. So we're going to click on the vertical. Click, and then the horizontal. It looks good. It lines up with the construction lines. Click. Okay, so I'm going to hit space bar to repeat the command. Space bar, and it remembers the 0.25 by 0.25. Again, don't click the corner. Click on the horizontal and vertical lines. And there it is. All right, so let me hit enter to exit the command. Oh, hit escape, my mistake, escape to exit the command. So there's our chamfers, and it lines up with the construction lines. All right, so now typically in a front view, this would be red hidden lines. So this would have been hidden lines, but since we're cutting through, we're exposing the inside, they're going to actually turn into object lines. Okay, so if we were doing this as a regular front view, if this was a regular front view, we would have been using hidden lines for the holes, right? It would have looked something like this. Okay, so if it was a plain regular front view, we would have been using red hidden lines for the circular holes. But since we're cutting through, creating a section view, remember we're not allowed to use red hidden lines, right, in a section view. For the love of AutoCAD, no hidden lines in a section view. I'll take points off on the test and also on the assignment. But on the assignment, you can resubmit to improve your score, but not on the test. Okay, so no red hidden lines. So our red hidden lines will turn into object lines. So select them. Notice they're selected. And move them over to the visible layer. Ta-da! There it is. Hit escape. So same thing on the right hand side. We're going to use, let's go to the white visible object layer. Use line command. And we're going to follow the quadrants. Right, the quadrant, left quadrant. I'm going to track, click. Right click, enter. We could have used mirror again on this one. Would have been faster. Right click, enter. Okay, so again, because we're cutting through, these are now visible lines and not hidden lines. Again, no hidden lines in a section view. All right, so we're also going to include green center lines. So let's go to the green center layer. So we do add green center lines in a section view, not red hidden lines. So no hidden lines, but we do include center lines. Again, we could have used mirror. All right, so we're almost there. Now we need to create our counterbore hole. So let's take a look at the dimensions. All right, so the depth of this counterbore hole, just take 1 and subtract it from 150 and we get 0.50, right? So this is 0.50. All right, so we're gonna track this corner, come straight down and then go 0.50 down and then 150 across, 150, and then 0.50 up. All right, so let's go ahead and take care of that portion. Okay, so once again, no red hidden lines. This will be white visible object lines. Okay, so use line command, and from this corner here, go straight down, click, and we're gonna go downward 0.50, so 0.50, enter, go across 1.50, 1.50, enter, and then we're going to go up to close it off, and there it is. Right click, enter to exit. Okay, so there's the first part of the counterbore hole. And all we need is these two lines from this corner here, go straight down to draw this these pair of object lines, right? Not hidden lines. No hidden lines. Okay, so use the line command and come straight down. And right click enter. And let's do it again. Line command. Now from the opposite corner, or the one on the far bottom right corner, go straight down. Right click enter. Okay, so there's our section view. All we're missing now is the hatching. Okay, so warning, when you do hatching, the profile has to be closed. If it's not, if there's the tiniest gap, you're going to have problems. It's going to pour into another area that you didn't want it to hatch, or it'll pour outside the view and keep looking for a closed profile, and it may slow down your computer, freeze Autocad, or freeze your computer. It does eat up a lot of memory. All right, so let me first turn off these construction lines. So construction layer, I'm going to turn them off. Okay, so we're going to hatch this portion, this portion, this portion, and this portion. The features, there's no solid going through the features, so we do not hatch these areas. Let's go back to the 3D model. Okay, so the holes, that's open space. You do not hatch those areas. Only when you're cutting through a solid, that's where you do your line hatching. Let's keep going through the counterbore hole. So the counterbore hole, that's an open space. We do not hatch this area. We hatch only the areas where the teeth marks are left behind by the saw, right? Okay, so let's go back. Okay, so we need to create a layer for hatching. Okay, so let's go to layer properties and create a new layer. Okay, so let's create our new layer. And I'm going to call it hatch or hatching. Okay, for the color, I'll go with yellow. Pick whatever color you like. Go with yellow for the hatching. You want to leave it with continuous. It'll default to whatever pattern you're using. If the pattern has dashes, it'll use dashes. If it has phantom lines, it'll use phantom lines. So just leave it as continuous. And for the line weight, it's the same as green center lines or hidden lines. It's around 0.30 or 0.35 millimeters in thickness. Okay. Whoop, I'm in the wrong layer. So I changed the wrong one. So here's hatching. Let me go back. I changed the wrong one. Here's hatching. So hatching is 0.30 or 0.35. Okay. And my visible white object layer, it's around 0.60, but I'm making it larger just so I can see the lines clearer for this video. All right, so there's our hatching. I'll use yellow, leave the line type at continuous, and line weights at around 0.30 or 0.35. Okay, I'm going to close the layer properties. Okay, so let's do some hatching. So let's first go to hatching layer. There it is. And here is the hatching command right below the ellipse. Okay, so let's go with hatch. Hatching. And to pick a pattern, you can pick from here, right? You can go down if you like to pick another pattern. If you want to use bricks or the symbol for earth. So those of you that are in architecture, you're going to be using the earth hatching type or pattern to represent the ground, the dirt, right? And there's a bunch of other options. And by the way, scale matters. Sometimes the patterns are way too large or too small, and you may need to scale it up or down in order to see it. Okay, and I'll demonstrate that in a minute. Okay, so I'm going to go with the very simple pattern. Let me go to the very top. I'll go with the ANSI 31. It's probably the most common hatching pattern in mechanical drafting. It's very simple. Okay, so you try and use one pattern per part. Later on, when we do assemblies, at the end of the last two chapters, we'll be doing assemblies. you want to use a pattern for each type of part. We'll cover that again in a later chapter. Okay, so I'll go with the very simple ANSI 131. ANSI, American National Standards Institute, came up with these patterns. Okay, at least for these first two, right? So let's go to ANSI 31. And I'm going to hover over the area I want to hatch. I'm going to go with pick points. Okay, so pick points. I'm going to pick a point inside of the closed profile. So pick point. Then I'm going to hover over this area, and it's not giving me a preview as I was expecting it to. Let me go ahead and click inside. There it is. All right, so we got our pattern. Go to the next one and click. I was expecting it to give me a preview, and it's not. Click and click. Okay, so we want to use the same pattern throughout. It's the same part, even though there's 4 different hatching areas. It's the same part, so you have to use the same pattern throughout. If you want to use brick pattern or earth pattern, go for it. Now, your pattern may be too small or too large to fill the area, so you can always scale up or down. Here's the scale. Watch what happens when I scale it up. It spreads out the pattern, as you can see. Okay, I'm going to go back to a scale of 1. If you have it way too tight, if you go with the very small scale, it's going to look solid, as you can see. See how it's looking solid? So that's way too tight. Okay, so this is a scale of 0.11. Let me go up to a scale of 1 and click away. Okay, now the angle. Now this pattern has an angle of 45 degrees. Even though it says 0, the pattern here is 45, but we can always rotate it. Okay, so it starts at 0, even though it has an angle of 45 for this pattern. And I'm going to go ahead and increase it. Let me increase it by 90. 90. And then I'm going to click away in 3, 2, 1, don't blink. And it rotates it 90 degrees, as you can see. Okay. All right, so again, make sure that the profiles are closed. If there's the smallest gap in your profile, it'll spill over into another area until it finds a closed profile. Okay, so let me go ahead and exit. If we're happy with our hatching, we can go ahead and hit close to exit that hatching command. Now you can always go back and make changes. I can always go back and double click on the hatching pattern, and there's this blue dot that'll allow you to make changes on the fly. Hey, I want to change the angle. Click on hatch angle. All you have to do is simply, let me turn off ortho so I have freedom to rotate. Turn off ortho. See, I got freedom to manually rotate. It's giving me a preview, so you can see. Click. See, so it changed the angle of the pattern. I can also change the scale. Click on hatch scale. And as you pull away from the blue dot that was there, the closer you get, the tighter it is. The further you pull away, the larger the scale. Okay, so you can do that on the fly, or you can simply type it in here at the top, the angle and the scale factor. Okay, once you're done, you can exit. Okay, all right, so let me double click to do a zoom fit. There it is. Now this is fine. You can now add dimensions if you want. Add a title block and border. If the spacing is too tight or too close between the views, you can always move them, right? Move them closer together if you like. I'm going to use the move command. Make sure you have ortho on. Ortho. Grab a point, and I'll just move it a little bit closer. If you're going to put dimensions, you want a lot more room. Okay, let me double click to do a zoom fit. There it is. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the answer key. Let's cheat. And there it is. We have our section view. Again, no hidden lines in the section view. And we have our top view with our cutting plane. Okay, so let's go back. Okay, so we're done. So we're gonna go ahead and save this. So we already have it saved as problem 10-1. So I could just hit save. Actually, you should be saving along the way every 15 minutes. Hit save, and it saves my file. Alright, so I went a little bit slow on this video, but on the next few videos, I'm going to go a lot faster because I don't want to slow you down or I don't want you to get bored. So this is problem 10-1. See you in the next video.